Sego sewa kwego. Yugodio ujats. Kanyage haga nigawi kohon sa soda. Ogwari nigawi daroda. So I'm going to switch things around, even though I had prepared, I think, to present in French. By nature of who I am or how I am, I seek balance. And so on the panel today, having two French presentations, and sort of feel maybe we should balance out with the other side as well. I hope that everybody has translators for those who've so thank you very much for having the simultaneous translation that allows for that as well. When I was invited to sit on this panel, I wondered why. You know, I would be invited to present at this conference. And as I sit here listening to the individuals on the panel, and as I sat and listened to people yesterday, I realize why this invitation came, so thank you very much for inviting me. The issue of gender discrimination is really behind everything having to do with, you know, a topic of two-spirit. And I really firmly believe, or I'm getting to the point of being totally convinced, that the gender discrimination is actually the basis of the colonialism that has caused so many difficulties in our communities. Listening, the talk about, you know, all the categorization of our children, listening to, you know, the issue of the urbanization and women and the discrimination they face in terms of employment and housing and everything that exists, the violence against women, and I want to, in particularly, I want to thank you for your sharing. It touched me on very many levels, as it does, I believe, many of us sitting in this room. And I want to thank you for making us part of your healing journey by sharing your story with us. Initially, I was going to present, I guess, a lot of history in terms of colonialism, and, oh, I've got to turn this on, I guess, because it's not complete. I didn't realize I had put this way. But I'm going to complete the images here. And I chose the images because I wanted to indicate that, you know, what I want to speak about is not something that's coming out of the air and something that's being created. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to accompany my family, in particular my partner of 30 years, to Thailand. Just came back 2 days ago. The beauty that I saw in Thailand in terms of gender diversity and acceptance and fluidity reaffirmed for me the need to continue to bring these traditions back to our communities, to bring these beliefs and these values back to our communities. We have been so colonized in even our thoughts and beliefs and values that sometimes we forget to question ourselves on where those thoughts, beliefs, and values came from. The notion that there is a difference between the genders, or that we have two genders, this binary notion, is something that was completely imposed. Prior to colonization, the fluidity was there. There was no question of being identified by your biology. It didn't matter whether you had breasts or a penis. That didn't define who you were as a person. Nor is it that we had to define our people in terms of categories of who our moms and dads are. One of my greatest accomplishments is being a parent of 4 wonderful young adults, 2 of whom biologically were brought into our relationship, but 2 others who somehow I have to somehow justify that, I have a parental role with them. They are my nephews. Are they biologically my nephews? No. But they are my nephews, and in this case, when their mother died, then we stepped in as parents because, that was the way, those are the values. And those are the values often that we've lost, even within our own communities. So when we face discrimination based on a system that's imposed, but also a discrimination within our own communities because we've been so colonized. And we have yet so much healing to do. And that healing means to look face to face ourselves, and to look at where those values that we hold and those beliefs that we hold, where did they come from? Is this really what we're about? Is this what makes us Indigenous and people and humans? The history of Two-Spirited and the traditions of Two-Spirited people faced the same pressures and destruction from colonization and the impacts of gender discrimination. That system came under question as soon as the Europeans arrived, because they took their history and their experiences and their views and beliefs that they developed and brought them over and did as colonizers do, and just simply assume everybody has to do this because this is the one right way. They had difficulty accepting the fact that there was such gender fluidity, that men and women were not categorized, or people were not categorized based on men and women and their biology, but rather that they were categorized, or they were identified, and they developed their identity through the role that they played in the community. I am a mother, I am a teacher, I am an auntie. I have many roles that I play in the community and in my family and in my circles. But nobody is the one who actually defines, no one should define me for me. It's based on my role, and my role changes. Sometimes we are men, sometimes we are women, based on the English definitions or the non-Indigenous definitions. But most of the time, we're very fluid. So these women who are facing so many things in an urban area are also activists, are also parents, are also learners, are also teachers. But this need to define and to categorize is not ours. Yesterday, I was listening to this discussion about language. Don't get me started on the language issue. But the point is that our languages are on a different base than non-Indigenous languages. Non-Indigenous languages are noun-based, and in that way are defined and static. So it is a chair, it's always a chair. It might be a blue chair, a gray chair, a big chair, a small chair, but it's a chair. Whereas in Indigenous contexts, our languages are based on function and verbs and action, and they are always in movement. They are not static. So there are many words for, there isn't one specific word for chair. It depends on the context and the function within that time. And because it may be this now, it's not necessarily going to be that tomorrow if it serves a different function. And that's a difficulty, I think, and there's a whole language issue that goes with that, but that's also a difficulty that I have with the word two-spirit, as many people do. The reason that that term is there is because the non-Indigenous world needed a way to define us and categorize us. But in our languages, there are so many different expressions of individuals who fit those roles. I don't know if it's on the next slide, but I'll try. Let's see. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So, and it's not based on a noun that we're going to give. It's based on the role that they're going to play in the community, or that they should play in the community. Unfortunately, due to colonization, they've been eliminated as individuals who count. And that's very sad as a mother, as a woman, as an Indigenous person, to think that we can throw away our children. These individuals had a role to play, and I'm not going to say a special role, but a role to play like everybody else. And due to colonization and the view of the binary gender system and the imposition of that, anyone who did not fit that definition that they categorized as male or female were seen as deviant, unwanted, sinful, and were rejected. And through the process of residential school, these new ways, these new systems of belief replaced the ones that were there. So the individuals became the throwaways. And it didn't matter if they suicided or got killed or had to leave their communities. And when we talk about discrimination, we talk about also discrimination from our own people and the violence that comes from our own people, from your own family members, who believe firmly for whatever reason that it's wrong for you to be other than male or female. In this invisibility also, that is a forced invisibility, what happens is that we also ignore what's happening to them in terms of violence in the outside world, or the discrimination they're going to face when they leave their communities and come into an urban area. So you talked about or mentioned missing and murdered Indigenous women. Well, within that, we also have to think about all of the two-spirit people, the gay, lesbians, who identify as gay and lesbian, or who are more tomboyish or more masculine, if you are biologically female, or more feminine, if you are biologically male. What about the transgendered individuals? These people are also subject to that violence, and often their disappearance is ignored. What about discrimination that the women face when they come into urban areas? Well, you know something? So do they. Because if they're a woman, they'll be discriminated against. They're Indigenous, they'll be discriminated against. Right? If they are two-spirit, they will be discriminated against. If they're transgender, they'll be discriminated against. And so the discrimination gets compounded based on this notion of somebody else's idea of gender and what is right. My children faced a lot of pressure growing up in the community. We made a conscious choice to have our children and to raise our children in the community because to us, the language is important, the values are important, and bringing those things back to our younger generations are important. And this was something we chose to face, but it wasn't easy for them. And so when our daughter accompanied us on this trip to Thailand, she was just so relieved to be in an environment where she didn't have to fear that her parents would be discriminated against. And she felt validated. Her experiences were validated. I listened to your story about the violence and the conjugal violence, the violence that comes in what's supposed to be a loving relationship. And it made me think of this young man who is two-spirit, who has been pretty much, kind of a prisoner in his own home because he's in a relationship with someone that he loves, but this person is abusing and refusing to let him actually go out, make friends, do things, on the outside for fear of losing control over him. We know that idea, right? And those ideas are there whether you are a gay man or whether you are, a heterosexual man. These ideas came from somewhere else and are there and really impact. But this young person is faced with that situation. And when I want to encourage him to leave and to go into some kind of safe space. But you see, are there spaces for for a young man to go, a gay man to go, to be able to get away from this violent situation? What if he was transgendered? If he identified as transgender, we have the foyer, thank you, for women and Indigenous women, but what if they don't have the biology to go with it? Where do they go? And again, another level of discrimination. There is, I enjoy the fact that our society is changing generally out there and we're looking at a more gender fluid, but we're still working on this basis of categorizing everything and giving words to everything and saying you're this, you're that, and this is where you belong and this is how you should behave, and let's generalize it and let's make sure that you fit that little box. But the truth is, everyone's an individual. What your biology is doesn't determine how you think, how you believe, and how you love. Nor does your biology determine your worth and where you're going to be and what career path you're going to follow. So if there's any message that I could give on the notion of two-spirit, is to give yourself the freedom, one, to question your thoughts and beliefs, your values, your views on things. Give yourself that gift in order for you to also break away from those categorizations and those boxes and the way that you should think. Our prophets, if we talk about Indigenous prophecies, have said that this time would come where our world would be in chaos, where it would be a time of renewal and moving into, hopefully, a time of humanity. But they also said that unless we bring back the two-spirit, the person who doesn't have a label, who can see differently because of having more of a view of being neither this nor that, or that we need, but essentially the message is that we need to bring everybody back. Those who were pushed away from our communities, those who had roles to play, those children that we lost, those many generations that we lost, which includes the two-spirit. Thank you.